There we go. All right. Can everyone hear us? It looks like we're live. I just want to thank everyone for coming to the New York Ag Collective. We're going to be talking about scaling. And so we've got a couple of different levels of that. And so scaling from kind of just getting into this ag tech farming and then like moving to multiple farms, you know, moving to different states. And we have like 3 lovely panelists here today. So we've got Sean and Robert and Mary, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And I'm just going to ask you guys to like share your bio so everyone can get to know you a little bit better, and specifically mention like what's your local connection to kind of either New York or the Northeast in general.
I'll jump right in. My name's Mary Wetherill. I am from Jersey City, New Jersey. I'm the CEO and founder of Green Food Solutions. My background really is more in health and in business. Many people don't realize that I've had a wellness center in New Jersey for about 20 plus years, really looking to kind of help people regain health, both for, from a planetary perspective, as well as from, a biological one for our bodies. And that really kind of connected me and brought me into the food space.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary.
I'm Robbie Shaughnessy. I live in Princeton, New Jersey, and am a general manager at Bowery Farming. I lead our production facility in Kearney, New Jersey, and have been with Bowery for 2.5 years. I'm newer to the agricultural space, so my background is in operations and general management. So before Bowery, I worked at nuts.com for 4 years, where I headed logistics and fulfillment operations for over 1 million packages a year, and led the manufacturing plant in Cranford, New Jersey for a couple years before that. So I was there for about 4 years all in. And one of the cool things that I had the opportunity to do at Nuts was be the product owner for our warehouse management system. And so there was building technology to figure out how to, ship nuts and figure out what to roast and mix and how to distribute it across the country. And at Bowery, I have the opportunity to contribute to building technology to figure out a much more interesting problem, growing crops better with fewer resources. So at nuts.com, I had the chance to kind of experience a company scaling and over doubling in size. And then got my start in operations at a supply company called McMaster-Carr, where I was for 4.5 years, mostly recently leading a technical sales department. So newer to agriculture, and excited to be with everyone here.
Well, we're happy to have you in the industry.
Hey, my name is Sean Peris. I'm with Three Forks Local Grains. Our farm right now is out of Keensburg, New Jersey. Our second farm, quickly scaling to a third farm right now. My background was actually more from the construction development world, and then which led me into renewables. So my 15 plus years in renewables, I started thinking about agriculture in a similar fashion. We started dipping our toe into the hydroponics world and just overall controlled environment, purely because the thought of investing in something to fix the cost of a commodity over a long period of time, just like renewables, is what made sense to me for agriculture. So knowing that the stresses that a lot of our traditional ag world sees and will continue to see at an increasingly at scale has led us to really hit this market hard, and we're looking forward to growing our business as well and seeing others grow with us.
Okay, just because we kind of had this unique opportunity, and I think a lot of people in the audience that are hobbyists or maybe kind of just getting into this, and all 3 of you actually came from a different industry. I'd love just like a quick story on like what got you into ag.
Honestly, for us, so at Green Food Solutions, we're a vertical farm training company that, sells, installs, and maintains hydroponic equipment for people. So we really help, people start farms. How I really got into the industry is really interesting. I would say back in 2016, I think it was, I was at Green Tech in Amsterdam. I hadn't started the company yet. And I was with people who were a part of something called the ABF at the time. And I don't know if I think it's an organization that still exists. And we were kind of exploring, the trade show that was going on. I was there actually, my co-founder in Green Food Solutions was actually there as an intern for another company she was working with at the time. And as soon as I walked into that trade show, I basically saw a huge problem. Again, my background is in systems, business, as well as wellness. But I saw that when you have a food system that has as many issues as our food system does, but then you have people developing products, but not necessarily solutions, but calling products solutions, there was going to be a huge problem on our hands as a food system. So, I think at the time, with 9 types of hydroponics in the industry, 9 to 10 maybe, right, with fogoponics on the line and all of this, but from an engineering perspective, there's about 9 to 10 types of hydroponic ways of growing food. But yet at the time it was maybe tens of thousands, and now it's probably hundreds of thousands of different brands that were emerging saying that they were all better than the next guy. So, that was something we saw was a problem, and it wasn't going to help with what was important to us at Green Food Solutions, which was basically food access, food security, food justice, finding ways for farmers in small urban environments to make a living and for that to work for them financially and economically. And what's it called? You were just sharing that, you're in Keansburg, New Jersey, and you're expanding larger farms, a lot of which because smaller ones weren't working for a lot of people who had originally tried to start them. So that was really kind of what brought me into it. I'm an activist at heart, a problem solver at heart, and I just really didn't want to see this go the wrong way for the industry. A little bit about kind of what got me inside of my knowledge base of systems was my co-founder was invited to be a part of a program that was at the time, claimed to be an accelerator. And while it wasn't, we ended up getting a really great experience for a year and hacking systems. We basically learned what didn't work about certain hydroponic systems. We learned how there are tens of thousands of models emerging when there's 9 from a engineering level. And we really became fertigation specialists and system specialists, and spent actually a couple of years, I like to say it's we've been in business for 6 years now, and then 16 to 2019 was probably the slow down to speed up. And then 2019 to now 22 was the scale, if you will, to name this, so, I just want to let other people kind of say how they kind of got into it, but our experience in kind of really knowing and working with every type of hydroponic system. Because when I left that trade show in Green Tech, I called so many people, and I had people send me systems, and actually in front of our shipping containers in Brooklyn, we had different systems, and it was run by Kimball Musk. So it brought a huge following and attention. So when people would come, we held trainings. So I spent that time developing our training programs in systems and ag operations.
That's awesome. I particularly love the call out that equipment is not a solution, which was featured heavily when we were talking about what is the most overhyped and underhyped piece of equipment in the data AI and robotics panel. Sean and Robbie, what got y'all into this?
I'll probably be the dumb response. Marketing got me. I think in 2015 or 2016, I think I saw a news thing on CNN about freight farms, and it was about the first one in Boston underneath an overpass, and it got me. It kind of planted a seed, to be completely honest, that made me start thinking about it. It was just as simple as that. And I came from Montana, so I've been around agriculture my whole life. And I just kept thinking about it. And so my now business partner, we'd be mountain biking, and he probably got tired of listening to me talk about it. He was in the food world, so I just kept trying to get him to do it with me. And then eventually we bought one, and then one turned into 3 very quickly. And then in managing those, we hired people and then figured out the market. So yeah, it was as simple as seeing something on the news.
Yeah, for me, I think about 3 or 4 years back, I saw a panel in food sustainability systems that featured vertical farms, and that kind of keyed me into the industry. And I saw that there are a bunch of players in this space that are really combining people, process, and technology in some ways that were just really interesting to me. And, I thought it would be a really interesting way to kind of take what I had done in both operations and kind of tech and systems and like bring that to a company that has a really important mission, growing crops with fewer resources and better ways more sustainably, and really trying to solve that big problem. So for me, it was also a way to make my work more meaningful and help a company grow. And so thinking about democratizing access to food and scaling, that's exactly what Bowery is doing, and have been just amazed at the progress that we've made and that the industry has made in the last few years.
Thank you so much. So one of the things I want to talk to you guys is you all kind of have like kind of a mix of an entrepreneurial background, or you've worked in startups. I use this phrase often is like, how do you scale with grace, right? And I think there's this kind of critical period. And I'd love to know like where you guys are on this continuum. If you think that there's a different continuum between like the core group of people, right, who have that passion of I'm mountain biking and I've talked my buddy's ear off until he like finally starts a company with me. And you start with that like tight group of people where you can all fit around a dining table. The vision is really clear. And then when you start hiring additional people, and some of that maybe can be diluted. And then what does it look like when you have to build a training program because there's so many of them, and then you keep going. So just kind of share with where your business or your project that you're hype about is at in its scaling journey, kind of maybe go into some of the pros and cons that you're experiencing.
I would say, right now we're really cutting our teeth at that first initial scale. We again started with, the 3 freight farms containers, realized that those aren't the answer for what we wanted to do. And then COVID really molded our mindset. Originally we wanted to solve for providing, really high-end products to the New York, restaurant world, and COVID changed that. So that made us realize that we needed to scale quickly. And then where after you do that, I'd say what this process has made us realize is that you can't lose focus of your first, second, and third phases while you're still trying to think of your, 4th, 5th, and 6th phases. Everybody wants to know what that story is. And it's, to be honest, really helped us polish, even talking to our employees or, on the road show, as they call it, speaking to everybody who you want to get interested, whether it's investing or offtake or anything as a part of the chain. To be honest, it's reinforced my belief in what we are doing is what's needed. And it's also made me realize, and I'm sure a lot of others, that, whatever politics you believe in, this is going to be led by private people helping solve problems with the help of local governments, larger governments. But it's really going to be driven through private industry, private investment. The same as the renewable world was, incentivized slightly, but it's still driven by people willing to make the push. So I think that's kind of what I've realized.
Actually, I think that's really well said. It kind of is what catalysted us ourselves. We saw, actually, before the Climate Mobilization Act was passed in New York City, we were farming in these shipping containers in Brooklyn, selling food, figuring out different business models and what didn't work about a lot of that, like last mile logistics. It was a year-long program that we were in there, and then we were actually renting space out of a failing commercial farm in the Bronx. It was on top of an affordable housing building on Tinton Avenue, and it was a commercial farm. It was growing food, mostly basil, sending it to Italian restaurants. But it was failing, and it started renting space out, and we had, kind of we got this bird's eye view in some like farm management, seeing like poor farm management, kind of here we are renting space in this farm. We moved our operations. We're continuing to sell to our customers, but we're on top of an affordable housing building, and none of the food is going to the people who live in the building. Now here as a company, we're dealing with the miles that our food travels and the, CO2 emissions that are associated with that. but food justice, food access, and the, finding equitable work for farmers was just something that was still very important to us. And here we're observing time and time again in different models that this wasn't going to emerge in that way, or it hadn't been, at least, in that way. So, we really saw, this concept was like, we created some subsidy programs in that affordable housing building, and we tried to make some of that food. But again, the commercial farm was mostly growing a lot of basil. So actually that failed, that didn't work. And then that farm closed down. But then I think the real growth for us was when we really got our first client, and it was in Bushwick, Brooklyn, in 2017. And that was in a 900 unit mixed use building in Brooklyn, where we had a huge 79 tower farm installed, and showed the owners of that building how we could actually make this work for them in their community, and actually start growing food. And, we've now had that farm for 5 strong years, and it's still successful. It's actually our pilot, flagship, whatever you want to call it, farm. It really was something that we tested on to see how this model could work. And, since then, this was that slowing down to speed up kind of period that I was talking about, like really taking the time. I think, if we're talking about inflection points, taking that time to know who you are, what you want to be, and what you're about, and do not pivot on that. Pivot on business models, pivot on suppliers, pivot on a lot of things, but do not pivot on what's important to you and what you want to see a model emerge from, and that's kind of what was truly at the forefront of everything we did. Even when we would have meetings with clients and say, this is what we were up to, this is what we have been able to achieve, and we haven't done this other stuff yet, but really gaining the confidence and trust of people that we would work through it with them. And now today, Green Food Solutions, that's exactly what we do. We're supporting farmers. We work in nonprofit organizations. We are starting farms and residential buildings as a product that we call a farm amenity. And all of the food is free for the people who live in these buildings. We have one in Manhattan, we have one in Brooklyn, we have 4 in Jersey City, we have 1 in Boston. In 2023 to 2024, we've got 6 new planned, 2 in West New York, 2 more in Jersey City, 1 in Philadelphia, 1 in San Diego. And how we're doing, like, literally emerging and empowering other farmers and farm businesses. A lot of people are going the proprietary route, and that works for many people, but that wasn't, in our opinion, going to work for food access, food justice, equitable pay to farmers, in this, like, so we call what we're creating a new local food system.
Well, Mary, I loved what you said about, particularly when you're opening farms from like the training perspective, right? Like you're really like, not only are you selling that farm and selling the support to run that farm, you're selling that trust, right? Like that's one of your biggest commodities. And it's actually like what I heard from what you said. So when you got your first client, did your proof of concept, which I think is one of those really critical goalposts along that scale journey, like being able to continually use your reputation management in the industry, which I think is very critical for this industry. We have a lot of people who are very entrepreneurial, who have really big goals and dreams, and over promising. And I think often we see under delivery. I was on the failed farms panel yesterday. Is like very, very common. And Robbie, I'm curious because I know that you are also at Bowery, like in a very large organization, scaling quite large. Like, kind of share how you feel about where you guys are in your scale journey, some of your inflection points.
Definitely. So thinking about Bowery's mission to democratize access to fresh produce, we need to scale to accomplish that, right? We need to have farms across the country and across the world. So I can share a little bit about kind of my experience here and how the company has grown over the last several years and is positioning ourselves to continue to do that. I joined Bowery in the beginning of 2020, and at the time we had a research and development farm, which was kind of our smaller scale proof of concept that we've since made many, many upgrades to, and is a completely different building. We had this production facility that I lead today in North Jersey, and we had just opened up a much larger scale farm in Nottingham, which is about 10 miles north of Baltimore. So I spent the better part of my first year at Bowery at the facility in Nottingham, basically helping to learn how we operate it, hire the team, and get processes in place for scale, not only to operate that farm, but to figure out, what the model at our future farms looks like. And it was a challenge. So I think early 2020, COVID was facing us at the same time, and we had just opened a facility that was several times larger than our previous largest one. And there were some challenges in that. We were building things and testing both, physical automation and technology for the first time, and even getting support at this, early in COVID was tough. So that's another challenge that we see with scale. Opening up farms not only within a small geographic cluster, but if travel is going to be a few hours. And with some of the farms we're looking to open in the next year, we will open, it's going to be a plane ticket, right? And so there are challenges there in moving supplies and moving people that take a little bit more planning, which we're set up to do. So, with where Bowery's at now, we just opened another facility kind of a little bit larger than the one in Nottingham in Pennsylvania, in Bethlehem. And so now that's up to speed and running, and we're positioned to open up 2 more at similar scale in Texas and Georgia in 2023. So you can kind of see the progression of moving from opening one facility at a time to positioning ourselves to open up more than one facility at a time, which is of course what we'll need to do to scale much faster. And thinking about that change, it's a lot of the same things that any business would need to do to scale. So putting in place process, structure, even thinking about like project management and making sure that you don't have different groups of people working on the same problem, not in collaboration. That's something that, again, think about geography. It's easier to do if you're in the same building. It becomes more difficult if you're at different buildings, not so far away. And it's a challenge that we're managing through as we continue to expand. And the growth has just been incredible.
So Robbie brought up something really interesting I want to really hone in on with the 3 of you guys. So, and I used to work at Bowery, so I kind of get this. What I perceive the structure of Bowery to be is these kind of satellite farms that feed information up to, and have like kind of a local management and local teams, but also feed information up to a overarching tech platform and separate team. And one of the things I think is really interesting, right, and we covered this a little bit in the data, AI, and automation panel yesterday, is how do you deal with getting the right information at the right time to make decisions when you start to scale? I know, Mary, you talked about moving into different states, and like Sean, you've experienced this. So I'd love to hear y'all's perspective on how do you do that? Like, how do you get visibility when you cannot physically be there, whether that is a 2-hour car ride or that is a 6-hour plane ticket? Since we're on here for AgTech Week.
And honestly, I might assert, get the plane ticket, get in the car.
Now, is that just because you want to see and it's fun for you?
So it's kind of a little bit of what we had to do, so in our journey of scaling up. So it was just, I think half of someone's success is just showing up. I think to say more about that, I don't know. I think that, so a lot of what that was for us, honestly, was, I think you pointed it out, the honesty, the earning of the trust. One of the things that we're really awful at is marketing. And, I haven't updated my website in years. I mean, there's, our most popular system is all over our website, but, there's tons of other types of hydroponic systems that we work with and install for, an array of clients. So while we have residential buildings where we're scaling and putting this in that way, we're also working with, all different types of commercial farmers, putting in projects that way and supporting them and their needs. So to kind of find that balance, our real mission was, again, finding that foundation of what was important to us, to layer it. Because, I was listening to the food policy panel yesterday morning, and a lot of what was being talked about was that you have to have this multi-stakeholder approach to scale up, and you have to have these solutions that are happening on all these, different levels. So that's what we went to work at doing. And we actually did have to fly all over the place and drive places and put that in. And, that was, we've never taken investment dollars. So, it really was a lot of our commitment and just passion that drove a lot of our success.
That's awesome. And I think in a client-facing business, that face time is so critical, where at Bowery, it's more like your internal customers who then sell products to your external customers. Sean, what's your take?
I think one thing we're realizing as we scale, and a lot of feedback from some really great partners that we've brought in, is that each and every farm still needs to be independent from each other. They still need to service the market that they're in. They still need to be able to stand on its own 2 feet, regardless. They can be run by us as leaders in kind of like a nucleus form, but each one on its own needs to handle its own unit economics. It needs to handle its own, different products as well. It's going to be a different product in the Southeast than it will in the Southwest. It's kind of like the McDonald's menu changes in every location. It's going to be that, and especially as you travel the world, there's going to be a lot more R&D associated with each different location, or a centralized R&D to be able to go out to each location. So you can support multiple facilities with a general leadership team, but you really do need to empower localized leadership teams, and that is really what we're figuring out right now and cutting our teeth on.
Yeah, if I could actually add to that, just one, if I may, with the kind of, so, our mission is to empower a new local food system. And one of the ways we really go about doing that is by, offering free planning and design and these things for people who want to start farms. But I think what the pivoting point this year that we're really doing that in the business model, that I think helps us fulfill upon that mission and will help provide more access that's on target with that growth that's needed. Because I agree with you, Robbie, like I really envision like all these Boweries, but then all of these farm amenities. Like our vision at Green Food Solutions is literally to see cities filled with farms. Like our t-shirt and our images literally have all these like windows popping out with like, whether it's a commercial building, residential buildings, homeless shelters, we put—
Mary, for people who aren't familiar, can you kind of give us a definition for farm amenities? Can you give us that definition?
It is a residential building that has a farm in it, like a pool or a gym.
Awesome.
So it basically is something that is in the building that is strictly there to serve the people who live there.
Awesome.
It's awesome. And I honestly just think that like when we are able to empower new farmers and new businesses, so like the new pivot at Green Food Solutions is where we have been working with individual nonprofit organizations and companies and pepper farmers in Chicago. We just shipped a farm out to Tokyo, Japan. We actually have 3 that are going to be set up in Tokyo. Osaka, we're working on a project there. Kamiyama, we're actually a huge farmer down in Colton Neck, New Jersey. We're putting up greenhouses. There's another farmer out in Kenya. So while we're supporting this, we can't do it all, right? So like I see these Boweries emerging and all of that, and I think that's awesome. We need what we call regional food systems. And then we're like what we call hyper-local food system, or, some people call them like a hybrid farm, whatever it is, right? I don't care about what we call ourselves. I leave that to the marketers. But like, I think the vision has to be fulfilled upon by empowering other people starting businesses in this industry, and not just keeping it to one person's business. So that's what we're doing now. Like if anybody wanted to start a Green Food Solutions business in their city and support their nonprofit organizations and their businesses and their regional growers and help them set up greenhouses and market farms, and then also put buildings and residential communities as a farm amenity, we support them in how to run that business.
And Mary, I love y'all's tagline, because we give a farm. I just think it's perfect. I know that you said that you don't love marketing, but it's just great. So I'd be really remiss if we didn't talk about labor as we scale and financing. Now, Mary, I know that you said you guys didn't, but like, how did that work? Sean, Robbie, I think we all have very different definitions of financing. So like maybe hit that first.
I guess maybe labor. labor first.
Are we feeling labor?
I
Cool.
think there's a lot of really interesting things about staffing these facilities, right? A lot of the roles that we have are new and didn't exist in the world 5, 10 years ago. You know, it's not like you can go to the vertical farm down the street and go find, you know, a new hire with all of the right skills and experience if you're designing something for the first time. So, you know, something that we see is like we need to train and develop people. And that's a huge opportunity for this industry. And as we advance, right, there will be a greater knowledge base out in the world for what we're doing. But I think like training and development is something that we've invested a ton in, and focused on like building career paths within our organization, like not just vertically within a function, but for example, like taking a farmer and moving them into a quality position, taking someone who is an agricultural technician and bringing them back into the farm team, and making them a leader, like a team leader or supervisor. So that's one big way that we're preparing ourselves for the future. Yeah, I think that's
a great point. This actually came up in the AgTech in schools, is like, what does that look like, right? Because you know, I know that, you know, Robert, this is something you and I discussed. Like I get messages all the time on LinkedIn. Oh, I have a master's in sustainable ag. What's the kind of job that I could get? And then we also talked about, okay, if you're learning AgTech and hydroponics in schools, is that like a suite of credentials? Is it ServSafe and OSHA? What is kind of the way to break into this industry? What's the way to move up in this industry? Especially, you know, and I really loved the point, and I think it's something that's very critical. And I very much felt this in a cannabis background. If you've never done this before, how do you get people who know how to do it? And how do you create a culture where it's okay to fail? Because that's how you're going to learn when nobody's ever done something like this before. And I think this kind of plays into that notion of pivoting, right? That we were talking about. Stay true to your values, but your business plan will change. So, Sean, Mary.
Well, I think there's no shortage of scientists that's willing to come in and be a food scientist. That's the one thing I've realized, that there's a gap. There's the science-based part that's there that can really help through the R&D process. But then there's a big gap in finding, let's say, competent head growers or competent people that, you know, have kind of some of that older traditional agricultural sense, and then trying to pair that with what the technology is now. I believe that there needs to be a lot more interaction between a lot of the manufacturers that are out there and the education world, whether it's the universities. Like I'm from Montana State University, so a big agricultural college, and it's like, how do you get them more interactive with the technology companies from, you know, maybe even it's back and forth between Holland and here or whatever, to start filling in that gap, and making them more available to the industry. I think that a little bit of a tangent, but I mean, think of this industry as everybody's keeping a lot of stuff close to the chest, that because there's the scarcity of finding people or the right solutions for things, it's theirs and theirs only. And so that's why I think
totally agree.
There's a void there. And I think one that will solve, as you know, like the Bowerys and the Gothams and the Fair Farms and the soon to be Three Forks, as we all grow, I think there will be a little bit of a move around to different regions, different, you know, shared resources. Something along those lines is a big opportunity to grow, but I think it's the number one thing holding us back right now.
And I heard kind of two gaps, which is one is kind of sharing interdisciplinary, and I think I heard a second gap in what you said, which is like kind of deep and narrow, kind of PhD, food science, plant physiology, and then where are the kind of daily ops competent kind of rank middle, like file? Is that a pretty accurate?
I'd say there's more available in the deep science side of it, because there are those PhDs have been researching forever at universities and private companies and things like that. It's more in that middle level.
We have to pull them out of the ivory towers and get get their hands dirty.
Yeah, be a grower. You grow it for a while, and then apply your knowledge to that, and and then that identification of, AI is going to supplant a lot of that, for identification of problems, avoiding problems. But you still need someone to direct that. And that's where I think a lot of the number one opportunity is, on the labor side of it.
Hey, it's only proverbial dirt, right? It's all hydro. You're not actually going to get too must.
Yeah,
Mary?
get your elbows in peat.
Yeah, I agree with both, both of these gentlemen. Honestly, I think that from a training perspective, as a vertical farm training company, we clearly think that that's important. I think that a lot of people were really kind of going the route of starting farms. We've been told thousands of times by investors who have come at us being like, oh, what's your business model? Would you like us to invest in you? And everyone thinks that, everyone has told us that it's oh, you have to create a system. You have to create a system. But I told you, really what's important to us is not about creating a product, not about confusing the market even further. It's really about kind of creating making a difference, being able to empower what we said we wanted to see happen. And I'm really thankful that, it is through the partnerships. It is through, the different teams and manufacturers that we've worked with, and their integrity and their knowledge and experience and their background, as well as when we held our first training. Farmers, I was blown away. I was shocked. We in Bushwick, Brooklyn, New York, here we are with the minimal knowledge that I come from in this industry of farming. Yes, I had my experience in the shipping containers and the 10,000 square foot greenhouse and hacking different systems, and I really brought it towards myself. But I wasn't a farmer growing up, and I didn't have anyone in my family that was a farmer growing up, and I didn't have that background. But I really see that there's so many people in the world who also don't have that background and want to be in farming. And it was really important to, when you have statistics the average age of a farmer in Japan is 88, or the average age in, the United States is 66. And I don't know if that's aged yet or not, but, as a statistic, but, that was what we were at the heart of solving. And I think that, so we became a training company, off the bat, and said, no, we're not going to continue the trend of everyone starting a farm or creating a product. And that paid out for us in the end, in the sense that so for the customer, for the investing side of it, it's something I call, and maybe it's a term in the world, customer financing. Earn enough cash flow in the business that you can run. So I said, we sold food in the beginning, then we sold systems. Now we're selling, these farm amenity products, and we're selling our support. We always, from the beginning, back in, when we were in the shipping containers, the thing that brought us in revenue was not the sale of the food. It was the sale of our trainings. So people would come from all over the world because Kimball Musk was who Kimball Musk was, but we were delivering training programs when everyone else wanted us to grow and sell food. And we wanted to work on the problem we were working on because there were so many other people working on that problem.
So it sounds like you kind of scaled through your partnerships, especially, as you mentioned, you have a couple of projects going into Japan, you've moved all over the world. How has labor really been a constraint as you guys have scaled? If that's one of your constraints, then what do y'all see as some of the trends in the industry, whether that is labor education, more people moving into this industry? How do you guys see this kind of shaking out in the next? So
it's funny, see, like everyone else, we deal with the shortage of well-trained people out there. So the thing was, we didn't see it as a problem, because that's literally the business we're in. So we train you when you don't know how to farm, so so every one of our clients, whether that's Wally Farms in upstate Hudson, New York, that has 40 acres, I think I don't remember what it is, of land. And we put in their hydroponic farms, they have greenhouses, they have arborists. We became a name that was trusted to support the person who didn't know how to grow food, because of our experience and where we came from, and we would be honest about what we knew. And we didn't really put on airs about that. We're also really organized. Robbie spoke to it. Like any business, you have to get your systems and your processes and your procedures in order. Just my background in business helped us kind of, I guess, organize, some of the things that we had to present to people to bring in this customer financing that helped us have cash flow to, continue to support the mission of empowering other farmers starting their businesses. because, you know, we wanted to see more farms emerge in that way. And now we want to see
kind of
more.
using that passion for fuel, right? Like using that passion to get somebody to self-educate and kind of train themselves. Now, Sean, I know you and I discussed AgTech programs in schools, kind of helping solve that labor gap, but like, how does that kind of impact, Sean, you and Robbie's businesses?
I mean, as you scale, obviously there needs to be that balance of labor and automation, right? So you're going to have a mixture. It's going to naturally be some more high tech, high capability types of positions. Also with some, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunity for internships. I think there's a lot of opportunity for really bringing people up through the ranks through it and creating higher paying jobs than they typically would have had in a normal agricultural, let's say traditional agricultural upbringing. But you still have to manage. We're still going to always have a cap of how many people we're going to have in a facility. So, and obviously, you know, whether anybody wants to say it or not, our industry needs to make sure that it operates the unit economics of a facility to be profitable, to grow, and to continue to attract money. So, you know, to be able to grow and scale and all hit the missions that we want to hit. So I think we're going to find that labor will have a cap per facility or per gross square foot type of thing. I guess much like greenhouse world is, you know exactly how many people per acre in a greenhouse. I think we're going to find what that real number is in indoor ag over the next few years based on the technology that's available. You know, right now our pain points isn't finding people to do it. It's finding people to stay once they're in it and incentivizing them to stay. I mean, that's a current pain point, but then eventually it's going to be, you know, what can attract that medium high technology type of position.
Totally agree. Just thinking about like the combination of labor and automation and how they can kind of transform each other. You know,
Right.
Thinking about data and AI, it changes the type of things that we need labor for. You know, you can think about like auditing crops and like looking at them and telling if they're healthy or not and what you do about it. You know, in the old days, that would be someone going through a field and like looking at the crops out in the world. In some of our facilities, it used to be people like climbing through them, and more, it's becoming managed by data and AI, and we still need someone to interpret that. It's just a slightly different role. And so I think that's really interesting. Another great example of it you can see, or I've experienced while at Bowery, is, you know, years ago, we did all of our packaging by hand. So we, you know, looked at all of our product and actually packed it by hand into containers. And think about like packing standards. Our product is pretty darn good, but not all of it's perfect. And so we used to have to train on like lettuce packing standards. And think about doing that and ensuring quality across many facilities in this country and eventually other countries. Like, how do you maintain consistency on that, doing it by hand? It's really tough. And so now, you know, using automation, we can simplify a lot of those tasks and have people focusing on like truly value adding tasks where we can build expertise, build skill, and have people like managing what the data tells us, making decisions. And it's a progression really, which is, you know, it's amazing. But it also leads to more interesting careers. Like, think about keeping people and maintaining them long term. Those are skills that we can build, that we can train, and like that's the type of thing that will help us retain people and grow the industry.
I love the upskilling call out, Robbie. And one of the things that I know I'd love to see is apprenticeships and that model coming into this industry. And in fact, many industries more. I think, you know, this idea that you have to go to college to be able to support yourself should be an option. We should have a plethora of ways to support yourself and support a family.
I couldn't
awesome.
say so better, Shannon, honestly, I really couldn't. I think that's the one main like idea that like the training programs that we have at Green Food Solutions are aiming to solve. It's like we hire people as apprenticeships to really train people. Like, because when it never really occurred to me the issue of retaining people, honestly, like because we do have the internships, and apprenticeships that we offer people kind of to preliminarily train them. But then there's also this empowerment of helping people start their own businesses. So, that expression of like, no one's ever going to work as hard in your business as they would for their own. So help them start their own, and that was kind of like, what we wanted to do was like, okay, I could try and hire everybody and train them to work for me, or I could train them in how to work for themselves. And I think that was a better route, or at least that was a better route for Green Food Solutions.
Well, and I love that kind of comment, right? Like when you can kind of like get people like excited about something. Sean mentioned like, oh, he read an article, Robbie read an article, and it was just like, what got you into this industry? I think a lot of people come into this industry very passionate. And then so how do you turn that passion into fuel? How do you use it to grow a business, whether it's helping somebody grow their own or growing kind of larger startup? Awesome. Do you have any more last minute comments on labor, or do we want to talk about money?
Your call.
All right. Financing. Nobody likes it. We all have to do it, except for Mary, who's apparently found the way to like get out of the hard bits.
Apparently someone told me that there's another, I mean, honestly, the big secret is put it on your credit cards and work really hard. Apparently Airbnb did it that way. I love listening to those business podcasts of how it was built. Do that. Listen to these things, see how other people do it, be creative, be an out of the box thinker.
It's interesting, in the phase of growth that we are, going from, 3 freight farm containers that, we fully funded ourselves, all the way up through the current phase, my partners and I have funded ourselves. So, we haven't taken on debt. We haven't done a lot of things. It definitely keeps you up at night. It keeps that hunger alive as well. But I will say there are points in time to grow on a commercial scale, and I'm sure Rob at their facility can attest to this. You must involve other people, and I think it's good to involve private equity groups, banks, because they poke holes. They are there to tear apart your business model and say why and how and what does this mean, and there's no way what you're saying is going to work, or prove me wrong. And it makes you rethink it. It makes you think about it 10 times or 20 times. And you're going to continue to go through that at each iteration. When we're thinking 3 and 4 phases down the road, we're already starting to solve for those, even though we have to do something one way on the first phase. We know that it's not going to be there for the second phase and third phase. And you have to be okay with that and explain why. So I would say that's the positives of finance. And as well as, I'd say the number one thing is that we've turned down, let's say, large equity partners because they didn't want to relinquish control. We still have to maintain control. If we're going to execute on our vision, you need to find a financial partner that understands that and can add to the team.
I think
they need to be an
I
active.
think that's very true. Yeah, with so much VC money moving into regen ag and ag tech space and climate tech, that rings very, very true.
We're still considered, it's still venture cap at this phase of what our industry is. And, there are some great groups, Bowery being one of them, is others. I mean, you can attract, it's endless on the scale that you can attract to this. So that's been demonstrated. I think I saw it 2.8 billion so far in 2022 after a, kind of a downturn in 2021. The sky's the limit. And that's also the exciting part of it. But I think you just need to maintain control and maintain the vision, but not have blinders on to not see what you need to do to adjust to be the best company you can be.
Yeah, similarly, Bowery has partnered with deliberate long-term investors like Fidelity, Temasek, Google Ventures in the past, who are committed to our mission and are in it for the long term. And so we have runway to build the next several farms, and whether you're at our scale or whether you're smaller, I think you need to have a plan and prove out profitability. in a facility for your network overall, and have a plan that tracks to that. So even if a facility isn't where you expect it to be, you know, manage those costs, be aware of how they're going to change with the inflation that, you know, we've seen, may continue to see, like, are they likely to increase, decrease, how fast? And you need to have an honest plan around that. And I think that'll benefit you regardless of scale and size, and is critical to growth.
Speaking of those kind of macroeconomic conditions that Robbie just brought up, one of the things I'm also really curious about, right? COVID was a pretty like good shock to the supply chain. How do you guys think of, as you're scaling, like controlling your inputs, allowing yourselves to actually have the pieces of things that you need to continue to grow?
We have to control it ourselves. I think that it's a proof point that you need to be more vertically integrated than you ever thought you needed to be before. You know, it's,
where's the Pete?
but yeah, I mean, it's going to drive innovation of other input things to use. You know, grow mediums, you know, seed coatings, nutrient bases, all kinds of things. You know, what do you generate on site? What are you going to generate for yourself? And then what's the business opportunity after you supply it for yourself to help supply it to the industry?
Absolutely. Grow Intelligence posted a awesome report on the unbelievable sky high rise, I think 27% overall of nitrogen-based fertilizer. Truly a wild price increase in less than a year.
Right.
Mary,
Yeah,
you
COVID
look
was
excited.
really-
What's up?
Yeah, COVID was a really
Go ahead, Robbie, please.
yeah, COVID was a really interesting test. And the supply chains were strained, and at the very beginning of it, like, we looked at everything we had risk on, we thought we had risk on, and overbought. We wanted to ensure supply. And in almost every case that worked well. But I think it's a good window into like what we could be facing in future risks, right? If we're gonna be the primary consumer of something out in the market one day, like, we need to either have a plan to continue to get that from the same source, or for some of these things, we're looking at like build versus buy or vertical integration decisions, and doing more of it ourselves, like Sean said. So yeah, you think about like all the major inputs to our process, like what we need, and you can think of what some of those things are. And we have to think hard about supply risk, and that, I mean, that's also like partnered with, can we just do it better? Is there is there something that we can get from manufacturing more of these things on our own too?
I'm just going to tack the fastest thing on to what he said before you go, Mary. One of the things that I remember very, very poignantly, and when I was working in wine, is, you know, so much of the equipment for winemaking is sourced from other countries. And so you have this one special bend of a pipe or a bolt that you can only get from France. And I just imagine, right, like when COVID happened and the shipping times, you know, went 3 or 4 times as long as usual, like, for, you know, vertical farming is kind of unique, and like we're 365, but that means you can't afford a backlog in the way that wine, if you miss it, you just miss it for the whole year, and that will like usually ruin you financially. So I think like that, how do you think, I think it's one of the things that we kind of discussed with failed farms that I think many kind of smaller operations and hobbyists don't think about is, when you start needing heavy equipment, what are the pieces that you know are going to fail regularly, and having enough on hand and making sure that's part of your CapEx expenditure now. Mary, sorry, I just had to scoot that in real fast.
No, it's a real issue for a lot of people. And I think that one of the ways, I can only speak to what we at Greenfood Solutions have done. Like during COVID, I guess one of the things that we were hit by were shipping costs. So shipping costs prevented us from shipping farms internationally for a long period of time, because sometimes just that sale of that farm was just as much or even less expensive than the shipping. So that was something that slowed down projects for us, and customers who were getting financing to start their farms. That became something that we had to help them juggle through. So that was something that we noticed really slowed down the process at which we were able to empower people starting their farms where they wanted to. We work extremely closely with all of our clients, like fully comprehensively. Like, well, I think one of the main issues that we see locally was not so much in supply chain or even pricing per se, but just really the quality of contractors or workers. So for example, Wally Farms was a farm that we had to work side by side with their contractors. It was a local company that was really great. Like, contractors were great at building buildings, walls, sinks, like what they built, right? I'm not a contractor, I'm not a plumber, I'm not an electrician, arguably a plumber. But not a certified,
aren't we all in this industry?
not a certified one. But other than that, like, truth, all seriousness is, all kidding aside, I ruin expressions. They made huge mistakes. And like, when we're dealing with our contractors here in like residential buildings in New York and in Jersey City, Philadelphia, we've had contractors that were about to make $17,000 mistakes because of how they were going to put in their piping, or how they didn't know how to be agriculturally informed about where to literally put a light, because it was counterintuitive to them to think that it should be positioned here as opposed to there, knowing nothing about agricultural lights, but just being very opinionated. So, there's a lot of, and it's not even just being opinionated. Like, again, I joke about a lot of things, but people are wonderful at their crafts, but there are these nuances and things that really destroy and create huge breakdowns in how something is implemented, So our challenges through COVID were in helping, like, it slowed down shipping rates, slowed down the process at which we could help people emerge local food systems in their areas. That's what happened for us. And then, like, also what happened for us was we saw that people, were being really misinformed about, or just wanting to get behind their local contractor. Like, a lot of contractors are going in the business of agriculture, because, it's such a booming business. So, like, if I can build a building, why can't I build a shipping container farm? Or if I can build a building or a kitchen, why can't I build you a science lab in your university? Like, we're literally just doing a ribbon cutting in 2 days for St. Peter's University here in Jersey City, where, like, the contractor is someone I knew 20 years ago in high school, but he's literally like making changes because he's being creative. He's actually got a lot of pride in Jersey City. So it's not bad things that are motivating these mistakes, but it doesn't make them not mistakes.
Right.
So, and that causes a lot of financial problems for people who would otherwise not have these in starting farms. So, a lot of what we do to kind of, even pre-COVID, to offset all of this, is we show people that, like, starting a farm does not have to cost as much as most people make you think it does. We worked out of freight farms as well for a long time. And actually, when in 2019, so 2016, we were in green tech seeing a problem. By 2019 rolled around, I was a speaker at Green Tech, telling people exactly what I saw in 2016 and how it hadn't changed. Like, we're still creating products and inviting people to attend shows to buy them. I literally spoke about how I could sell you a $85,000 at the time. I know the price has gone up for freight farms, but at the time I could sell you a shipping container. I was working with the CEO at the time, but he's no longer the CEO. But I didn't think it worked, and I didn't want to do that. So there were things that did work about that on many different scales. Like, I see that, someone even on this panel had, like, you can make market farms and commercial farms work. You can make shipping container farms work. We help people install them, but it's not that one way doesn't work. It's the way in which you go about your whole business model and business plan that is or isn't going to work about that system that you choose.
Totally agree. And given that, I have 2 more questions for y'all, and then we're going to take some Q&A. So the first one is, if you could go back in time to yourself before a critical inflection moment of scale, describe the inflection moment and what advice you would give yourself. It doesn't have to be ag. Just think, like, if there's somebody in the audience who's going through something like this, what advice would you give yourself that would be helpful to them?
Spend your initial capital wisely.
Perfect.
Even to Mary's point, like the systems and things that are out there and available might get your initial interest or whatnot, but I think some different types of research, some other things probably could have saved us some steps along the way. And also, don't be so fixated on one idea. Be able to move and adjust. And I know it's easy to say that, but I think a lot of people get stuck thinking that it's one way or the highway. And I just think you got to be flexible.
There's a lot of ego death in killing your old ideas and building new ones, 100%.
Right.
I honestly, and I don't know if I actually didn't hear what you said there, Shannon, but I think you used the word ego, if I heard, or maybe
yeah, there's a lot of ego death in killing an old idea, pivoting your business, and pursuing something new.
Okay, no, and that's true. Actually, I maybe I was just knowing I was going to say something about that. Honestly, if I was going to give advice to people, if your goal is to start a business of your own, whether in farming and somehow, I would say really there's so much ego, honestly, was what I was going to say. So be aware of your own ego and the egos of others. And I think that how you can go about doing that is through collaboration and build strong partnerships. And I would have loved to have learned the lesson of being less doe-eyed and sensitive, honestly, about like people who come across as collaborators, but like the shipping container program we entered, to even the ag community in New York City that, you know, we felt we were always kept at arm's length from. So like there's collaborators that truly support you growing your business. And then there's all of these people that are in the industry that are just, you know, there's a huge competitive vibe. Like stay true to you, do what you need to do to build your idea, your company, do your internal research, and don't get so caught up in the scene.
And kind of use the partnerships that you were mentioning earlier to help you scale.
100%.
Robbie, what about
I think
you?
asking for help, not being afraid to ask for help, is a point of advice that I would have given myself when I joined Bowery. Right as we were launching our at that time largest facility, there's a lot that I didn't know. I always find like personal satisfaction in solving a problem myself, but with something this new, where there is so much expertise, not always with the same exact type of process in the same way, but there's often a lot that I find here, and even in industry, where you can adopt best practices. I think just being more ready to seek out advice and help and would have served me better. But I think this applies like even if you're independent, like with a small facility, farmers are generally really nice people. So are people in agriculture overall. And actually, one of the things that struck me about Bowery years ago when I was getting introduced to the company and interviewing for roles was something that they told me is like, there's room for more than one winner here, right? Like we hope other people succeed too that are trying to do similar work, and we still do today. Right? We're all trying to solve common problems with different approaches, and there's room for more than one winner. And like we want other folks to do well, and like I know that I'm happy to provide as much help as I can, for example. And I think that that's something that more people should be willing to do, just ask for help.
Great intro to the second thing. Thank you for teeing me up so well. I'm going to ask that anyone who's observing this right now, if you want to drop any questions, we're going to have Q&A. So I'm going to give you all some time to think about any questions. You can just drop it in the little Q&A button at the very bottom of your Zoom screen. But I'm going to give our lovely panelists today a minute to just like super fast, like what's the project that you want us to hear about? You kind of want to like cheer on. If you want to drop your email in the chat so people can reach out to you. I know Robbie's already offered to help anybody who needs help, so we're going to hold him to that. I'm going to drop my own personal website. So if you guys just want to like kind of go round robin and say like, hey, this is what I'm working on, or this is the kind of services I can provide or help that I want to give, go ahead and take it away, chaps.
Yeah, we're 3forkslocal.com. We're just in the New Jersey area right now, expanding pretty quickly, but we'll have a lot of good news to share in Q4 of this year. So we're excited to be able to to be out there a little bit more to people. And I appreciate the time, Shannon, with all the good questions. And Mary and Rob, I've enjoyed chatting with you guys as well. And Rob, to your point, I would say one thing that's actually you brought up that I really enjoyed is that there is an opportunity for the industry to share a lot of stuff. That old school farmers help farmers mentality can still be had here. I mean, we have experienced that and been very fortunate. You know, one of the larger groups that people do hear about, I mean, was actually sharing with us finance solutions and things like that. And you know, it's a close knit group, I think, at the moment, despite of the scale. So I think there's a real opportunity. I feel that, you know, having been in the renewable energy world, this feels kind of like the early days of that. I think it's exciting. So leave it at that.
Awesome, Mary. I already put your website in the chat, so you can.
Okay, great. I noticed I can't share.
I'm on it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And Sean, I got your website in there too.
Yeah, no, I guess, can you reframe the question again? I was actually just technically trying to do that.
No, totally. So it's just like,
Words.
what's the quick like project or plug, or like if somebody,
Yeah.
like what are the things that you're giving to the community right now?
So right now we offer vertical farm trainings to people. We can do them virtually or on site. We have locations and farms, and all of our farms operate as showrooms. So you can come in, get trained in one of our facilities, learn about the different systems. You can hit us up to schedule that. We do private and group. So we can either come to your facility as well. We often do this for people who have establishing farms that have staff that don't know what they're doing or haven't had growing experience, so we can go on site. We're also, inside of our mission of empowering a local food system, I was sharing that we help people start farms for their own businesses. And we also help people, actually this is new at Green Food Solutions, we're helping people start Green Food Solutions locations of their own. So in cities where you live, you can start through our support. We'll train you in how to, you know, set up farm amenities in residential buildings in cities where you live. We'll show you how to work with the nonprofit organizations and set you up with all of the same suppliers that we work with, so that you can actually just not have to do all the hard work of the 5 years of figuring it all out, and just kind of start a business that starts making a difference year one. And that's really what we've been proud to say. If one thing I am proud of at Green Solutions is we've shown all of our customers how to have a cash positive net flow. You know what I mean? Like a net positive cash flow. Sorry, again, not always the best in that, but what's great about what we do is that when we help people show how to cover their costs, improve profits, that's like one of the first things we show people in our meetings. So that's why we're able to make the difference we're making in putting farms and buildings in cities, and we would like to support farmers who would like to do the same.
All right, thanks, Mary. I don't have any personal business or website to plug. You can find Bowery products in this area in Whole Foods, ShopRite, Amazon Fresh. But no, I've just really enjoyed the panel. It was great meeting Sean, and I know I've known Mary and Shannon for a bit of time. But yeah, just grateful to be here and participate in the discussion. And thank you all for the amazing discussion.
Thank you, Robbie. So my quick thing is I've moved in, I've done a career pivot, speaking of staying true to your values, but changing the business model. So I do coaching now, and I've really found like a lot of joy in supporting people on their own journey, particularly if you're looking at an entrepreneurship path or a founding path. So I've dropped my website in here. We've got 2 questions so far. I'm just going to ask our panelists, so like lightning round. One, which I think is really particularly interesting, is from Brian saying, going back to this concept of scaling and systems, how do people see integrating tech-heavy farms to other important infrastructure like waterways or upstream or downstream manufacturers and processors, whether that's food waste, power, fertilizer? I'm actually going to start because I think that this is a really cool question, and I think my example will kind of help frame it a bit. Cannabis growing needs a lot of CO2. And so we've actually partnered with putting cannabis facilities near distilleries and breweries who have CO2 as a natural off-gassing of their process. So we can like take a substantial cut of cost for that input. particularly because post-COVID, we actually had a very, very intense CO2 shortage, which led to a lot of long lines and costly inputs for that. So if you guys have examples of kind of how you see as this industry scales, how we would maybe connect to other types of infrastructure or manufacturer.
I can actually speak a little bit to that in the sense that, so a new partner that we're working with out of in Morocco, out of Casablanca, is the Agadir University. And there's one of the partners who actually is putting in like a solar panel. They're a solar panel company that has this new system of retractable solar panels. So they're really primarily working with the university on renewable energy. They're a renewable energy company, wind, solar, primarily. And what I thought was really cool about that is that, like, even a company like ourselves that is doing what we're doing, kind of collaborating with these people, creating more of this renewable energy and saying, hey, wow, how these two businesses can intersect, because obviously our pumps need to be taken off the grid, and so do our LED lights, So, I mean, there was a while ago, like well before we even formed as a company, like a project we did after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, where we put in a small vertical farming system and actually got like Royal Caribbean and some other players to actually like sponsor it. It was only about like $600 or $700. I got phone calls from the solar panel company at that time saying that it was only $600 to take that off the grid. Now, this was just pumps. Obviously, we're relying on the sun in Puerto Rico. So there were no LED lights associated in that program. But I think that in our business model, as small as it is inside of like, the smaller size farms that we're doing, infiltrating cities with, filling cities with these farms, that is going to be just as much energy that needs to be taken off the grid. Like, look around and see how many buildings are in New York City. And, if we're having 6 farms this year, 10 farms next year, 20 farms the year after that, 30, 40, 50, right? In one city. I mean, when we have 100 or 1,000 farms in New York City, like that's going to have these renewable energy, so we're thinking about that with some of the partnerships we're creating now.
An interesting progression that like Bowery has made is moving from finding a building and building a farm into like building a building, and in the design of that, right, that gives you a lot of flexibility in your costs and how to make the building more efficient, smarter, like integrate with the technology, but also gives you the flexibility to do more activities in the building if you want to. So thinking about some of our inputs, like we could attach things to a building, or make sure that our buildings are positioned in a network that kind of optimizes for that. But there's other things that we're doing too, right? Think about like basics like solar panels, like installing those on all our new facilities, but also using like renewable energy sources like hydropower to power our farms. So
yeah,
like there's a lot.
Baltimore is off hydro, right? Partially.
Yes, all.
Yeah, I think going about it by tackling the lower hanging fruit, like everybody's mentioned, renewables first, and then to Rob's point, as you scale, it is easier to build the facility around the farm than a farm around a facility. You do lose a lot of efficiency opportunities, and then that really the vertical integration is important, but it's also going to where do you regionally select to put something? It's going to change your location as you scale. Compared to some of probably your original planning.
Actually, it's one of you're absolutely right. So like in our model, we're like farms are going to be in every building in cities, right? So like that really becomes a city issue. So we've worked with, or I'm going to say work with, but spoken with policy, drivers here in New York City about saying, and many developers have met with us saying like, what would be needed if, a city were to have that many farms in it. And obviously electrical subsidies are something that's on the table. I think is a huge thing. That's something a city should consider. So, I mean, depending on, obviously if you have one facility or 2 or 10, right, then you're thinking about where to put these renewable energy sources to supply that energy, right? But like in our model where, you know, where the city is just filled with farms and all buildings, you kind of have to think about, that's where I think New York, you know, where policy and government does have to step into play, because, you know, I truly believe, like what you were sharing before, that, you know, it does rely a lot on the private sector. You know, there's a lot of the buildings that we're able to put, you know, that we're putting farms in are basically, you know, there's the people who are believing in that concept and idea and, you know, making that happen with us, you know, and us, you know, showing them how to make that happen. So, you know, there's that combination where it's like, where are your farms going to be and exactly how do you get energy there is going to be, I think, something, again, people have to think outside of the box about, because depending on the model of that particular farm or farm.
Where are your farms going to be? Great question. Sean, did we get to the end of your feedback?
Yeah, it was just tackle low-hanging fruit first, and then as you grow and expand, you know, kind of take advantage of what's available.
Awesome.
I think you
So
also
many
have to
great
be
perspectives.
technology agnostic. I think being agnostic and not so bought into one particular type of technology, I think is important also to be able to adjust.
Great call out. Henry Gordon Smith mentioned the sitting on one of those, you can move plants and things around and this will be a robot and drive around your facility without needing any help technology, which, you know, we'll see if that ever comes to fruition. Great perspective, like Mary, like amazing that you've been able to go without financing and kind of scale this business, like Robbie bringing this like really awesome startup background, a lot of tech that we saw behind him. I think there was a scissor lift little teaser behind you. And Sean, thank you so much. Which I put your website here in the chat. So panelists, thank you so much. We are going to close. Thank you, and I will figure out how to close this. Okay, bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.